Ranking every Overwatch hero by how fun they are to play. This list is going to be 100% subjective. It's just going to be my gut reaction of when I initially think of a hero, how fun they are to play in my head. This list is going to be biased. For the record, I am a DPS player, specifically a hit scan player, and it's only natural for a list like this to be influenced by the heroes that you play. The least fun hero in Overwatch to me is Orisa. Orisa to me always felt sort of sluggish. Like the fact that her gun is a projectile always made it seem like it was just not as consistent as I would want it to be, and it just makes it feel so unbelievably clunky and unfun to play. Main things you do on Orisa is you plop down a shield, you fortify when you're about to take damage, and then of course you have your ultimate, the bongo. Now as a DPS player, when my Orisa puts a bongo down, I get a little bit excited because I just know that I can have a field day with the 50% boosted damage. So bongo is a type of ult that's a lot of fun for your team to use, but for you, again, you're just still using that clunky Orisa gun. I don't know, I think in all the years I played Overwatch, I can't remember one time that I actually had fun playing Orisa. Next up on the list is Bastion. I don't know what people get out of playing Bastion. You're just this giant sitting duck of a target that's just going to get farmed by any long range spam characters. The main thing you do when playing Bastion is you just kind of sit there and you shoot. And then nothing about it is particularly riveting. I guess Bastion's ultimate could be fun to use if you actually got really good with it, but unfortunately I've just never had the incentive to learn exactly how to use tank form to its optimal ability, so naturally I just find Bastion to be a boring character. The third least fun character to play is Brigitte. Keep in mind that this list is about how fun the heroes are to play and not how fun they are to play against. Either way, Brig is god awful. Like Brig is probably the least fun character to play against and one of the least fun characters to actually play. I don't know, you just kind of sit there, you trigger Inspire off cooldown, and you pack a DPS or your other healer to help them win duels. Rally isn't necessarily fun. The only thing fun on Brig is just kind of like inting into their backline to try to kill things, but unfortunately if you play Brig like that, you're just gonna lose a bunch of games. Next up is Torbjorn. I mean, I don't think there's really much to say for Torb. You throw a turret in the back and you spam the enemy's tanks. Hitting difficult to hit like crit shots across the map on Torbjorn doesn't feel half as rewarding as any other DPS in the game. His ultimate, he just kind of explodes molten core everywhere. I don't know, dude. Literally every other spam character just has way more to their kit that makes them more fun to play, in my opinion. I will get some hate for this one, but next up is Mercy. Now, I will say that old Mercy, when she could still team res, was a lot of fun, but ever since her rework, I've just never had that much fun trying to play Mercy. I think personally for me, when I get onto Overwatch, I just want to like shoot the other team, you know what I mean? And unfortunately, although Battle Mercy can be a lot of fun, at the end of the day, you're probably hurting your team more than helping it if you Battle Mercy more than 1 or 2 times per game. Next up on the list is Baptiste. I don't know what it is about Bap, but I just think he's unbelievably boring. Bap is one of those heroes that on paper should be fun to play for me, but in reality, they're just not. Finding the balance between doing damage and, you know, pumping in heals to your tanks, as well as finding just the right time and place for immortality field should be something that puts Baptiste further up on the list. But for me, I guess the hero just never clicked for me. I've just never really had an exhilarating experience playing Baptiste. Next up is Reaper. I will say that the rework to Reaper shotguns, I feel like that was what, like a year ago? I don't know. It's hard to have a concept of Overwatch patch times considering that they're so spaced out anymore. But whenever they made Reaper shotguns have more of like a pinpoint accuracy, that's when Reaper became a little bit more fun for me. They kind of made Reaper into a character that's better at taking duels against other DPS rather than being such like an over-the-top tank buster. But still, I've just never really had that much fun playing Reaper. Next up on the list is Mei. The one thing fun about playing Mei is seeing the absolute dismay in the other team's face whenever you wall their main tank off and freeze him to death. If you enjoy seeing other people suffer, you probably enjoy playing Mei. I will say though that her right click is actually really fun to use. Something about right clicking a Pharah out of the sky on Mei is just so satisfying. But the rest of her kit for me personally is just not something that makes me wanna play her day in and day out. The least fun hit scan DPS to play is Widowmaker. Widowmaker for me is hit or miss. I don't play Widowmaker every single day. I'm not somebody who's consistent enough on Widowmaker to play her every single day. Like I'll have those days where I just sit in the back and I hit literally every single headshot. But I would say like the other 80% of the time, Widowmaker is an absolute nightmare for me. I mean, it's kind of obvious guess the Widow's entire kit just revolves around whether you hit shots on her or not. So in my opinion, how fun she is to play is literally only determined by your ability to actually hit those headshots. Next character is Symmetra. Okay, hear me out. Symmetra overall is a relatively boring character to play. Sure, you can do some crazy over-the-top sim TP strats where you can get your team into positions that they otherwise wouldn't be able to get into. But for me, I guess the common theme is if I'm helping my team more than I'm helping myself, then I'm not having fun. And I just realized that I'm an unbelievably selfish human being. But hey, I guess that's why I play DPS. On the bright side for me about Symmetra is if you're full charge, just absolutely zapping the shit out of the enemy's tanks to where you could just turn on a squishy and just instantly delete them. That is one of the only moments in Overwatch where you just feel like an absolutely broken character. But unfortunately, the other 90% of the time, you're just kind of spamming in shots, placing turrets, placing TPs. But even her wall is something that benefits her team as much as it benefits her. She's just a very like supportive DPS. So I guess I learned something about myself here, and that's why she's lower on the list. Next up is Cassidy. For everything that I said about Widowmaker, you could pretty much say for Cass. I would say that I'm probably a little bit more consistent on a character like Cassidy than Widow. So there are more days where I actually have fun playing Cass. But yeah, if I'm having a day where I'm just like not missing, obviously Cass is really fun to play. But if I'm not quite warmed up yet, or if I'm just having an off day with my aim, like Cass is just miserable to play. Just like Widow, the rest of his kit isn't fun to use whatsoever. You know, you got Stun, Fend the Hammer, Roll, and High Noon, none of which really get me excited to use. So yeah, I think this is just where Cassidy falls. Next up is Sombra. If you have the flow of Sombra mastered to where you're farming EMPs really fast and you're hacking the enemy's tanks just at the right time and you're hacking people out of their ultimates and you're landing the biggest EMPs, the fattest 6-man EMPs, then I'm sure Sombra is really fun to play for you. Unfortunately, I am just unbelievably bad at Sombra. In fact, if I had to pick a single DPS that I'm worst at, it probably has to be Sombra. So for that reason alone, and this is why I said the list is biased, I don't have fun playing Sombra. Like, it's not fun to just get absolutely shit on time and time again. If you're somebody that has mastered this character, then I'm sure you might have her all the way at the very top. Unfortunately for me, I just can't put her any higher than this. Next up is Moira. Okay, so if you're playing Moira how most people play Moira, and probably how you should play Moira, and you know, just kind of letting your tanks take damage just so you can charge up Coalescence and initiate that first fight with Coalescence, and then Moira is probably the most boring character to play in the game. But if you play Spicy Moira and take little off angles and put yourself into situations where you're taking like smart 1v1s versus the enemy team's supports or their DPS or something, then Moira is insanely fun. So if you're not doing some like crazy over the top stuff that in reality probably shouldn't work, then you're just not gonna have very much fun playing Moira. Next up on the list is Junkrat. Something about spamming into the other team on Junkrat and occasionally getting an accidental kill or two is just really fun to me, especially if they're playing like super farmable tanks without a Lucio. I'm just imagining playing Junkrat on defense on Anubis A, and the other team is just like on Rein Zarya without a Lucio, and you could literally just have an absolute field day farming tanks, getting like a tire once per fight. Junkrat just absolutely destroys shitty comps on specific maps, and on those specific maps he's a lot of fun to play. But you know, if I were to try to force him on some point where Junkrat is clearly not the pick, then I wouldn't be having a lot of fun. So that's why Junkrat ends up like towards the middle of the list. Next up is going to be Reinhardt. I feel like some people think Rein is like the most fun character to play in the game, just running at people with a giant hammer, just absolutely taking them out. But for most of the community, playing Reinhardt is just not necessarily that fun, especially once you start taking CC after CC from the other team. I mean, on paper, he should be a decent amount of fun to play. You have things like a Shatter Duel versus the other team's Reinhardt, where the Rein matchup is kind of almost more of a mind game than anything else. And that in theory could be a lot of fun, but unfortunately, like I said, most of the time you're just going to be spent getting absolutely just CC'd to death, unless you're decent enough at the game where you can try to kind of avoid some of that. Similar to Reinhardt is Winston. Again, another character that I'm sure if you're just absolutely elite at, he's a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I've just never took the time to really learn the character Winston. I said it in my last rankings video, but if I had to pick a character that I'm worst at, it's probably going to be Winston. interested. I love the idea of being able to just absolutely farm the enemy team's backline with massive cleave damage from your gun, and to really kind of find the limit of the character as you try to see how much value you can get before you press primal. And then of course Primal Rage and its insane skill ceiling would be a ton of fun to try to learn to master, but again, I've just never put the time in to actually do it. I just realized I have 3 tanks in a row, but the next character on the list is D.Va. As the list goes higher and higher, I think there's a common theme of 1, more mechanically demanding heroes tend to be at the top of my list, and 2, characters that require a lot of game sense and a lot of understanding about the game also tend to be higher, and I think D.Va falls into that second category. There's something really fun about ult tracking the enemy's team's tracer's pulse bomb and then intercepting it last second just when she's about to kill your entire backline, or something like a Zarya grab, same thing. I mean, if you're consistently ult tracking and constantly thinking about what the enemy's team's ability is, then you can completely just carry fights with your right click, and that extremely oppressive nature of D.Va is just a ton of fun to abuse. But again, it's still fun to me because it takes like a lot of brain power to actually be able to get maximum value out of D.Va. Next up on the list is Zenyatta. Zenyatta's a relatively simple character. You sit in the back and you make sure the right target is discorded, and then you proceed to put in some spam damage to that target. Sometimes in Overwatch, that's all you want to do. You just want to sit in the back and just put in as much damage as possible. There's something about playing a glass cannon support character that has the ability to just like win a duel with pretty much any character in the game from any range, but only if you're really good at actually hitting your projectile. That is just a lot of fun to me. Maybe you disagree. Anyways, the next character is Sigma. Sigma is relatively straightforward as well. If you can consistently hit his primary fire, you're probably going to have a lot of fun on Sigma. As well as the same thing I was talking about earlier with Defense Matrix being a really fun ability, Sigma Shift can also be a relatively fun ability to kind of always be thinking ahead of when does the enemy team Zarya have Grav, and what can I do to mitigate that Grav's value? Like, can I potentially eat it, or can I shield it off? There's just a decent amount of thinking with Sigma on top of him having, you know, a difficult to land primary fire, and all of that combined kind of wraps up into being one of the most fun tanks in the game to play. Next up is Ana. For a similar reason to Zenyatta, playing a support character that has a high mechanical demand is just a really fun thing. Like, while playing Ana, you're pretty much always expected to be aiming, hitting shots, whether that be on your team or the other team, or landing sleep darts on, you know, the nanoblading Genji, or constantly taking off angles to nade the other team's tanks. There's so much to Ana's kit to actually master that I could spend literally days of my life just practicing and having fun the entire time. And in the same vein as kind of Moira, as long as you're constantly thinking about how can I use my abilities and ultimate in interesting ways, rather than just sitting in the back and heal botting, Ana is one of, if not the most fun support character to play in the game. Next up on the list is Soldier 76. Again, this list is biased. Some people might think that Soldier is very boring. I, for one, as somebody who plays a lot of hit scan, I find it just a lot more fun and rewarding to track a Pharah out of the sky, rather than, you know, flicking onto her head and killing her with 2 shots like a character like Cass. Again, the way to play Soldier optimally is to just go on ridiculous flanks, take off angles that pretty much any other hit scan in the game would just get punished for taking, and just play him in a way that sort of surprises the other team. And anytime that I play a character like that, I'm just gonna have a lot of fun. A number 11 on my personal list of characters that are fun to play is Wrecking Ball. Wrecking Ball is kind of a character like Pharah or Doomfist in the sense that their mechanics are so different from the rest of the cast, meaning that if you one-trick Wrecking Ball, you probably think he's the most fun character to play in the game. But if you're somebody like me that only has, I don't know, maybe like 30 or 40 hours at most on Wrecking Ball, then you'll find yourself feeding more than not. Or you'll find yourself accidentally grappling off the map or getting yourself caught in unfortunate situations. Wrecking Ball's movement on paper is just a lot of fun, whether you're constantly harassing the enemy team's backline or knocking in the enemy's team's tank to give your team a free kill. I mean, it's a lot of fun if you could actually execute those things in game, but for me, I'll end up just feeding like 70% of the time. Moving on to the top 10, number 10 is Lucio. I don't care which meta we're in, I don't care how out of meta Lucio is, or how much your team just calls you a thrower for picking Lucio, and how many times they ask you to swap Brig. Lucio is fun to just literally just amp speed and go for the enemy team's backline and just have an absolute field day, or at least try to have an absolute field day. When you're playing Lucio, his movement feels like no other character as you just zoom zoom across the map at hyper speed. I mean, unless the other team has a really good hit scan, if your movement is good on Lucio, it's really hard for them to kill you. That means you can just go in and try to take duels versus the enemy team. And in all honesty, the character is just a lot of fun, and that's coming from somebody that doesn't even play him that often. And number 9 on the list is Roadhog. Everything I said about Lucio, about no matter how much your team tells you to swap, no matter how much your team tells you you're throwing, it's still fun to just go on ridiculous flanks on Roadhog and catch one of the enemies off guard. All I'm saying is there's a reason why there's so many Roadhog one tricks, and it has nothing to do with him being the meta pick. Roadhog is just fun. He's pretty much the character you play if you're a DPS player that wants to get faster Qs. Is Roadhog a fun character to have as one of your teammates? Absolutely not. But if you're the one playing him, he absolutely is a lot of fun to play. Next up is Pharah. Pharah is another one of those characters that I am not very good at. I don't have good Pharah movement whatsoever. When I play Pharah, 9 times out of 10, I will just float in front of the enemy team's hit scan and get 2-shot by their Cassidy. But I'm still gonna have a lot of fun trying to do it. Something about sneakily gliding through rooftops and conch blasting your way into the middle of the enemy team to just absolutely assassinate one of the squishies is one of the most fun things you can do in Overwatch. Pharah, like Junkrat, like what I was talking about earlier, just absolutely farms terrible team comps on certain maps. Except I do think Pharah's mechanics when compared to Junkrat is just a lot more fun at the end of the day. So that's why she ends up so high on the list, despite me being absolutely terrible at her. The next one is completely biased, and I fully expect everyone to absolutely disagree with me, but like I said, this is my personal list. And number 7 is Ashe. Ashe is the perfect middle ground between Cassidy and Widowmaker, except in my opinion, she actually has a kit, unlike the other 2 characters. Cass and Widow to me just feel like it's all aim and nothing else, whereas Ashe's abilities are more interactive. Coach Gun can be used as a CC ability or as a movement ability. TNT has the power to completely obliterate the entire enemy team if you land it at just the right place at the right time. And the amount of C9s I've got on points like Hanamura second using Bob is just way too many to even keep track of. I do want it to be clear that I am an Ashe player. Like, I have like hundreds of hours on Ashe, so it's only natural that I think she's one of the more fun characters to play in the game. I mean, why else would I play her? At number 6 on the list is Hanzo. There's 2 different heroes in the game that I've hit 4,200 one-tricking. The first one was Ashe and the second one is Hanzo. Personally, I think both characters are relatively similar in how their playstyle actually functions. They're kind of both played if you're slightly off-angling. They're long-range DPS. The only difference is obviously Hanzo is a projectile and Ashe is a hit scan. In my opinion, there's nothing more satisfying, like literally nothing, than just absolutely logging somebody's head from across the entire map. Hanzo, like the other spam characters, also just has the potential to punish out of position tanks with one regular arrow and then a full storm arrow. Basically, you can just eliminate the entire other team, whether it's squishies or tanks. He's just extremely versatile, and for that reason, for me, he's one of the most fun characters to play in the game. And number 5 is, in my opinion, the most fun tank in the game. It is Zarya. A lot of the little things that I've been saying throughout the video all apply to Zarya. Like when I was saying that you can bail your supports out with defense matrix by eating a pulse bomb, well, you can kind of do that on Zarya by bubbling them. And when I said that being full charge on Symmetra makes you feel like an absolute badass, that also applies to Zarya when you're full charge on her. She's all around just a really fun hero to play, especially for a DPS player playing tank. Obviously, she's not the best pick in probably most situations, let's be honest, but there's very little things in the game than just running it down with a Rein Zarya Lucio comp on King's Row. Number 4 is Doomfist. You have to have a degree in Doomfist abilities in order to actually master them. All the different diag spots, all the different rollout locations, there's just an unbelievable amount of things that you can learn on Doomfist, and a ton of little tech. I mean, definitely more than any other character, like little techs that only apply to Doom. I mean, there's some Doomfist players that have probably spent like thousands of hours just grinding in lobbies trying to find all these different things. And trying some of those things out for yourself in game is a lot of fun. On top of that, there's not many things more satisfying than doing a successful rollout on the enemy team's backline. He's definitely not the character for everyone, and some people probably think he's boring. Some people probably don't have fun with him at all, but I think he's one of the more fun characters to play. Would I ever want to one-trick him? I mean, definitely not, but I'm not gonna lie, playing him every once in a while is just an absolute blast. And number 3 on the list is Tracer. If you watch my ranking every hero easiest to hardest video, I had Tracer at number 1, and I think that that's why I think she's so fun. Like, there is no way to master Tracer. No matter how good you are at Tracer, in my opinion, you could always be better. There's always something more to learn. You could always be practicing your pulse bombs. You could always be practicing your aim, or you can watch over your VOD to see if your decision making was right or not. And just the insane amount of skill that it takes to play Tracer makes her really fun to me. On top of that, playing Tracer in Overwatch is a feeling that doesn't come in any other FPS game that I've ever played. Like, it's so quick, there's literally so much happening. If you don't play Tracer regularly, you might not know what I'm talking about. The feeling of playing Tracer is just completely unmatched. Number 2, this is going to be controversial. It's Echo. Now, if this was a list about characters that are fun to play against, Echo might be at the very bottom, or at least very close to the very bottom. But this is characters that are fun to play. I love characters like this where there's seemingly like no limitations to the movement. Like, you can pretty much be anywhere on the map that you want to be. All you gotta do is fly and get there. Her abilities can definitely feel oppressive to be on the other end of, but they're a lot of fun to actually be on the giving end. Getting good at her primary fire is a lot of fun. There's something so rewarding about just completely deleting like a Sigma off the face of the planet with your beam ability. Her primary fire and her sticky grenades are also a lot of fun to use, but what really makes Echo the second most fun character to play for me is her ultimate. When playing Echo, you can almost show off how versatile your hero pool is. Like, if you're good at Winston, you can dupe Winston and just go ahead and farm the enemy's team's backline with Primal Rage. Or if you're good at Doomfist, same thing. Just dupe Doom and use your abilities to just farm the enemy team's backline. If you think Echo's a little bit too high on my list, we'll just have to agree to disagree, but number 1, the most fun character to play in the game is Genji. I think just how many Genji mains there are throughout all of the ranks of Overwatch really speaks for this. Like, despite him being arguably the worst DPS in the game for the past 3 or 4 years, there are still a ton of people that refuse to play anything but Genji. And what I was talking about with Tracer, like, there's no other FPS that compares to the feeling of playing Tracer. There's no other FPS that compares to the feeling of playing Genji. Whether it's dashing through the enemy team over and over again while farming dash resets off of your eliminations, or it's having that big 4-man nano blade, playing Genji is undoubtedly really fun. Obviously, in recent years, with the introduction of characters like Brig and Baptiste and, you know, the double shield meta, Genji has become less fun to play just because he's not fun to play into those comps. But I think that's more of the fault of the other heroes in the game, and it doesn't say anything about how fun Genji is to actually play. Basically, what I'm saying is when characters like Genji and Tracer are meta, that is when Overwatch is at its most fun. I mean, you could see this. There was just statistically more people playing Overwatch during the dive meta than there have been since. And obviously there's a bunch of factors that go into that, one of which being the lack of content that we've had in the past couple years. But undoubtedly a big play in that is just how oppressive playing against Double Shield, Bap, and Brig are on ladder. Let me know what you think. What's the least fun and what's the most fun character in Overwatch?